So I have a whole lot of students who really don't understand about percentages, most especially converting percentages. So I wanted to address this in this video. So first of all, just what are we even talking about? The whole point of this video is to learn to convert percentages. And when I talk about convert, the word convert means to change, just in general, like if you use that word at all. In English, you mean to change something. But specifically in math, we're talking about changing from one equivalent form, so one equal thing, to another. So from a number that's equal to another number, we're changing, it's a number that means the same thing, just another way to write the same number. So change from one equivalent form to another. One equivalent form of a number to another. All right. Now, so you're like, well, why do I care about converting? Why would I ever want to change from one equivalent form of a number to another? Well, it turns out that some numbers are more useful than others, depending on your scenario. So it's really important to understand, if you want to convert percentages, what a percentage is. So I just want to let you know that a percentage is one of the ways in math that we describe a piece or a part of a number, or a piece or a part of a group. But it's not the only way. There's actually 3 common ways to describe pieces and parts. And you know what that means? When there's 3 ways to say the same thing, you could convert back and forth between the 3 different ways. So super important that we know how to convert. Okay, now understanding these conversions is really going to be based on understanding 2 important things about pieces. So you know, if I walked up to you and I told you I had some pieces of pizza, you have absolutely no idea how much pizza I really ate until I answer 2 questions for you. The first question you'd probably be wondering is, how many pieces did she eat? So you might ask me, how many? That's super important information. You know, if I tell you I ate 12 pieces of pizza, of course I ate a lot more pizza, I think, than if I ate 3 pieces, probably, but maybe not. It actually depends on another factor. As we all know, you could cut your pizza into some very different sizes, y'all. You know, I could take my pizza and then just cut it once like that in half and tell you I only ate 1 piece, and you'd be thinking, oh, Kate must be dieting, and really I'm sick right now. I ate way too much pizza. Okay, so it's not only how many pieces I ate, it's also what size. So answering these 2 questions are absolutely intricate to every single type of piece number that we do in mathematics. If we ever want to describe a piece, we are going to have to answer 2 questions. How many pieces and what size? Okay, so let's talk about the 3 ways that we describe pieces in math, and let's look at how we answer those 2 questions. How many pieces and what size? So let's first look at our least favorite. Everybody hates fractions, right? So we'll get it out of the way and get it over with. When you're looking at a fraction, like for example, 2/3, the 2 numbers there represent the answers to those 2 questions. Now, I know all your elementary school teachers made you memorize at the top of a fraction, the 2 is called the numerator. But why is it called the numerator? To numerate means to count. That top number, the numerator, tells you how many. Tells you how many pieces. I have 2 pieces. And then, so what does that bottom number tell you, the denominator? Well, a denominator means what size or what type. And so that's the one that tells you what size. So one way to think about 2/3 is 2 things of size 1/3 or size third. So if you took a pizza, of course, we're talking about pizzas, and you broke it into 3 pieces, those are thirds. And to say I had 2/3 of the pizza is to say that I ate 2 of the 3 pieces. Lovely. So, you know, we do that with fractions, but you can also answer those same 2 questions. How many pieces and what size with decimals? We can answer the exact same question, but we're limited on sizes. So with fractions, we can have any size we want. You know, we could have 4ths, we could have 17ths, shoot, we could have 156ths. Nobody cares. But in the land of decimals, not so much. We're really limited. In fact, deci means 10, and that's because we're only allowed pieces that have to do with the number 10. You remember when you had to do your decimals and they made you memorize the place values? And they told you the first one was tenths. When they did that, they're talking about the size. If you have a number there, that's 5 things of size tenth. That's 5 tenths. So it's like I took my pizza this time and cut it into exactly 10 pieces. And I have 5 things of size tenth. Now, of course, it's not only tenths we can do in decimals. It's any power of 10. You know, we could do tenths, we could do hundredths, we could do thousandths, and so on and so forth. I'm going to spare you the pizza, okay? But just to let you know, like if I wrote this number, 0.56, that's 56 hundredths. That means I have 56 things of size hundredths. Like I broke one whole thing into 100 pieces and took 56 of them. Or if I had, like you guys read it as 0.723, but the proper way to read that is 723 thousandths. That means I took my pizza and broke it into 1,000 pieces this time and ate 723 of them. So once again, I see my numbers answering the question, how many? But this time, instead of getting the size of the piece from a number, I'm getting the size of the piece from a place value. So my place value tells me of what size. That's a little weird, but I'm still answering the same 2 questions. How many? What size? How many? What size? Whenever we describe pieces, we have to answer the question, how many and what size? So as you see, as we moved from fractions to decimals, we got a little more limited. You know, we can only do tenths, hundredths, thousandths. We're limited to our place value sizes with decimals. Well, if decimals were limited, percents are so limited. With percents, you only have one size, one option. The percent sign, like for example, 56%, literally means out of 100. Your size is always out of 100 with percents. So if I say 56%, I am saying 56 pieces of size hundredth. Percent means break something into 100 pieces. Okay, so with fractions, we can break into any size piece. With decimals, we can break into any power of 10, 10, 100, 1,000. But with percents, it's always based out of hundredths. Those pieces are always taking the total and breaking them into 100 equal pieces. Great. Now that we understand that, it should be relatively easy to convert back and forth. So we're going to do a few examples here. Now, I need you to know that you don't have to necessarily have conversions memorized if you're going to take the GED. Because anytime you have percents on the GED, you do get your TI 30XS calculator in which to do the conversions. So you could do it in that. And I have another video on how to do that in a calculator. But I just want to show you how converting between percents and fractions and decimals just has to do with that fact of knowing the size of your pieces. Again, knowing the size of your pieces. So we said that percent literally means out of 100 or hundredths. Hear me say hundredths. That means breaking something into 100 pieces. So to break something into 100 pieces, you literally divide by 100. Well, there's 2 ways to divide by 100. If you're a mathematician and you want to be super duper lazy, you just divide by 100 by making a fraction. 87 divided by 100 can just be written 87 over 100. 87 hundredths. Yeah, guys, literally 87% is just 87 over 100. Percent literally means out of 100. So, I mean, and that guy is absolutely and totally done, whether you know much about fractions or not. Now, you're like, it can't be that easy, Kate. I've dealt with fractions before, and fractions are a pain in the butt. I know it's going to get harder. That first skill doesn't get any harder. But what can get harder is how you would express your final answer. Let me show you what I mean. So, for example, if I were going to convert 35%, again, percent literally means out of 100 pieces of size hundredths. So I would just do that by saying I have 35 pieces of size hundredth, or 35 out of 100. Now, this is a totally true, right, correct answer. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I wouldn't use this as a final answer because it's not what we call reduced. All final fraction answers are supposed to be reduced. You're supposed to pull out any common factors. Well, the super nice thing is the number 100, I hope you guys know, is the same as 10 times 10. And all a 10 is composed of is 2 times 5. So even though 100 looks big and scary, all it's made up of is 2's and 5's. So all you need to look for, and as far as common factors are concerned, are 2's and 5's. So I noticed that both these numbers end in 5 or 0, so they must both be divisible by 5. So I can divide out that common factor of 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20. And there's no more 5's or 2's in 7, so I must be done. Okay, so this was right, just not as simple as it could be. This is a simpler form of the answer, which is what we prefer for final answers. So let's try it with 5%. Again, 5 over 100% means out of 100. Look for any common factors. Of course, 5 and 100 have 5 in common. Let's divide it out of both of them. That's how you reduce a fraction. You divide out any common factors. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. And so my final answer there would be 1/20th. Cool. Looking good. Now, of course, 50% way simpler. I know. You guys are like, Kate, I don't need to do any math to know what fraction 50% is. I know it's a half. Okay, if you know it's a half, just write a half. You can just like ignore me. For the next 10 seconds, it'll be the greatest moment of your day. But I'm going to do it the long way just to show you it works. 50 over 100. Obviously, those two things are both on the 10 times table, so let's be efficient. Let's take a 10 out of both of them. And you're going, Kate, you said there'd only be 2's or 5's. Guys, a 10 is a 2 and a 5 at the same time. A 10 is a 2 and a 5 at the same time. I'm just taking out two numbers at the same time. All right. So 50 divided by 10 is 5. 100 divided by 10 is 10. I'm almost done, but 5 and 10 still have a number in common. They both have a 5 in common. And now, of course, 5 divided by 5 is 1. And 10 divided by 5 is 2. So even if you didn't know that 50% was 1/2, you could get there using this method. So how about if it's big and it's scary and it's more than 100? Yeah, don't get intimidated. Same idea, 165 over 100. And you go, Kate, oh my gosh, I don't know how to reduce that. Again, just look for 2's and 5's. Obviously, they end in 5 and 0. These numbers are both on the 5 times tables. And I think I'll use sight division. If you don't know sight division, you should totally go check out my video on it. It's amazing. But 5 goes into 16 3 times, remainder 1. And 5 goes into 15 3 times. And then 5 goes into 120 times. And no more 5's, no more 2's in 33. I am done. All right. Now, it does get scarier if there's decimals, obviously, because if I take a decimal, 5.4, and put it into a fraction, that's going to look gross. We don't leave decimals around in fractions. So you're going to have a little bit of knowledge to get rid of a decimal inside of a fraction. And that's actually deeper than I want to go right now. And so what I'm going to do for you guys is just show you how to do it in a calculator with this one. Your calculator will actually simplify that fraction if you have it in math print mode. So first make sure that you're in math print mode. And then you can type this fraction by typing 5.4. And then n over d. Make sure you use the n over d fraction button. And then 100. And then enter. Oh, and my calculator didn't obey me. I wanted a fraction and it gave me a decimal. It gave me 0.054. Darn it. So I'm going to press the quick convert button. I was a liar. Quick convert button looks like this. Anytime you get a number that you didn't want, you get a decimal when you wanted a fraction or a fraction when you wanted a decimal, try the quick convert button right above enter. I hit that and I see that that's the same as 27 over 500. And by the way, I could have done that by hand. I just don't want to overload you in one video. All right, so really easy to turn a percent into a fraction, just put it over 100 and reduce if you need to. Again, just put it over 100 and reduce if you need to. Percent literally means out of 100. So you say, well, then how's that relate to decimals? Well, remember, we have a decimal place known as the hundredths place. The first one is the tenths, but the second one is the hundredths. So if 87%, we said 87% means the same as 87 hundredths, guess what? As a decimal, it's just 87 hundredths. Now you say, Kate, how am I supposed to remember that? Well, two ways. One way you can think of it, well, the 7's just in the hundredths place, so that's 87 hundredths. But if you struggle with that, you could have always done the division. Remember, we said percent means dividing by 100. So you can take your calculator and literally go 87 divided by 100, and you know what you get? This is what you get, 0.87, 87 hundredths. Okay, so same thing with 35%. If you were to divide that by 100, you would get 35 hundredths. Now, I really like understanding it this way because a lot of students who forget rules that we make them memorize, and I know your teachers told you jump this way and jump that way and so many decimal places and movements and left, right, and my students who have disabilities get all mixed up. How many jumps? What direction? I don't understand, Kate, so I don't teach it that way. But the idea here is 5%. Percent literally means 100 pieces, hundredths. So if I'm going to convert 5% into a decimal, that 5 better be in the hundredths place. 5 hundredths. Don't put it here in the tenths place. That's 5 tenths. You've only broken it into 10 pieces instead of 100. And again, you could do it in your calculator, 5 divided by 100, and you can follow along and see with me that, oh yeah, look at that. I get 5 hundredths, because that's literally what that place value there means, broken into 100 pieces. All right. So then that makes sense as to why 50% instead would be in the tenths place. Let's show you what I mean. So 50%, so look at that. That would be 50 hundredths. So I have a 50 with the last digit in the hundredths place. That says 50 hundredths. But as I hope you know, mathematicians will very frequently drop trailing decimals. There's no reason to keep that 0 there. And so we'll just write that usually as 0.5. 50 hundredths is the same as 5 tenths. In the same way that 50 pennies, 50 cents, is the same value as 5 dimes. Okay, let's look at 165%. So you might be thinking, how am I going to do that? Well, same thing. I could just take 165 and make sure that 5 is in the hundredths place. So to do that, I would need to put the decimal right here. So I would have tenths and hundredths. And I get 1.65, or 165 hundredths. Again, if you're like, what kind of ninja devil magic is this woman up to? You could always do it in your calculator. 165 divided by 100 would give me 1.65. And knowing it that way will really help when the number is like this, because you're like, what the heck, 5.4%? What in the, I don't understand. There's already a decimal and I'm going to convert it to a decimal. Again, percent means out of 100. So a quick and easy way to do that is just divide by 100. So 5.4 divided by 100, and I see I do get 0.054. And again, that follows the rule. If you memorize the jumping rule about jumping so many places, of course, nobody's breaking that little trick rule. But notice what was in my ones place, just like always, what was in my ones place, what was in my ones place, what was in my ones place. The number that was in my ones place every single time ends up in the hundredths, 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 hundredths. And once again, the number that was in the ones place ends up in the hundredths, because I'm taking every one whole thing and breaking it into 100 pieces. All right. Okay, so quick and easy way to turn it into a decimal is just to divide by 100. So really, we're doing the same thing. Whether we convert to a fraction, we're dividing by 100 with a fraction bar, or we convert to a decimal. In this case, we're actually literally doing the division and dividing it all the way out and converting it into a decimal. But it's the same basic process. With percents, it's always, 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 always based out of 100.